is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Yeah. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Yes. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. I'm trying, I'm crying, I feel like I'm dying. I'm doing my best.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Being Human and Other Shit. I am Melissa. I have Stacy, my bestie counterpart. And today we are, I believe, Adriana, you're Sacramento as well, right?
Yes, Sacramento.
Currently, so we're all on the ancestral homeland of the Nisenan people. We acknowledge
Yes.
them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. And you may see a familiar face here today because we have a repeat guest, one of only two, I think, right?
I think only
Aww.
yeah. Well, also, can we say really quick that you I don't know if we've said before that you are in Sacramento now.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
Melissa.
Oh, Melissa.
I was so confused right now. I was like,
last time you saw her, she wasn't in Sacramento on last season. She now lives in Sacramento.
oh,
That's right.
Yeah.
You're talking about Adriana. I was like,
People are gonna watch us be like, why are they both so confused? Do they live in Sacramento?
I thought you were talking about Adriana. I was like, we saw her in Sacramento.
No, you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes,
Anyway,
I am here as well. So yes, please. We want to hear about like updates on what you've been working on. I know that you have really like changed a little bit of your focus, and so please tell us what's going on.
Yeah, like narrow down more than like a change, because I feel like it is not different than where I was, but just like kind of like, oh, okay, like I think I found my little niche. So I'll start with introducing myself. Adriana Rodriguez, ella. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and officially a relationship educator. Like I'm claiming this idea that we don't have proper education when it comes to being in relationships, right? Like I really think one of the things that has been coming up in a lot of the couples work or adult family work that I've been doing most recently really has told me that we can't start diving into the things that bring people to therapy right away if we don't have any like foundational. How do you listen to one another? How do you take turns? Oh, are you noticing that you're overwhelmed? Maybe this is not the time to talk, right? And so I think like for me, like that shift of like intentionality, that when people are coming to see me in therapy, I'm gonna assume that almost all the time people don't have that language to be able to have to really be heard, to be able to communicate, to be able to like problem solve and things like that. And so I think like what I'm doing right now is that I'm pulling out sort of like therapy. I see like in three elements. It's like the insight building, very non-directive. It's like, tell me about it. How does that make you feel? Oh, like I wonder where does that come from? Like where do you feel it in your body? Very like non-directive, very like insightful, reacquainting yourself with your body, with your emotions, with your thoughts. Then there is the other part of the skills building and the like actual tools, right? Like the how do you do things? And then there's this active that I think nowadays is being called coaching kind of out in the world, but coaching also happens within therapy, right? That is that you understand the things, you learn the things, and then actively with your therapist, you're like trying them out and like figuring out how's it going? Like where do you need a little support? Where do you need more like cheerleading and whatnot? And so one of the things in this pivot that, or like this change that seems that people are kind of grabbing on to what I'm doing is that I've pulled out the relationship education stuff. And I'm like, this is the stuff for social media. This is not where you get your advice. This is not where you think about your problem so specifically that when you read a post, you're like, this is the answer to my problem, because problems are too specific and situations are too specific, right? But is there room to kind of like provoke some like, oh, I didn't handle that conflict that well. I might have been overwhelmed when I was dealing with that issue with my partner, et cetera, et cetera. So that's like the intentionality around pulling out of therapy the skills, giving them to folks and being able to say like, do with them what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And then, if you're finding problems and you're finding that you can't do it on your own, then that would be kind of like a good cue to go get more support, right? But I think it's like empowering people to be in relationships a little bit better. Like that's what I feel like right now I'm being called to do, like that type of work.
I love that.
I feel like for me with therapy, like, we feel like Melissa and I've been pretty open about our own journeys as far as like being in therapy for long periods of time and whatever. It's almost to me where I'm like, feel like I'm hitting a ceiling, like I feel like I've been kind of honest where I'm like, I'm kind of hitting a ceiling where it's like, I feel, I mean, I'm always going to be in a healing process, but I feel really good. So it's like, now how do I like better or attract those relationships, romantic relationships that I want in my life? You know, I don't, I mean, I know how to pull people, but it's like, maybe my closing's not always the greatest.
Well, it's not the pulling is not like where it kind of falls off for a lot of people. It's the maintenance after you've pulled something really good. Like, how do you maintain, right?
Yeah.
I'm interested in just like the adult relationships in general piece. Like, I think that that's so important, like how we interact with our families, how we interact with each other. I mean, even relating that to like work environments and stuff, like how we're interacting with other adults in our lives, and like that all overflows into everything, right?
Absolutely. You know, it makes me think about, I used to have this job that I came in, and this group of folks who were like super core. They had been working together for a long time, and I was kind of like the newbie coming in, right? And they had this type of language that they talked to each other about being a family. It's the work fam. And I remember being in a meeting one day, and I was like, actually, I want to talk to you as my coworker right now, because my boundaries and my respect to you, like, it would show up so much better than this assumption that all families are functional, or that all families know how to communicate. Actually, for me, my professional persona allows me to show up with more alignment, that if I'm seeing you as my buddy, I'm going to be more goofy. I'm not going to take things as serious. Or if we're talking about family, it's like, oh, they're like the boundary crossing, right? That can happen in families. And so it's like, how are we in relationship with people? Like, that is like the big question that comes up. Like, who did we learn from, right? Family of origin, from our friends or family, or from like super romanticized notions of the media, or also like super toxic. So it's either romantic or toxic, right? Like but what is the in between, and like that boring, like to just sit on a Friday night with your partner or with your sibling or with your parent and just chill.
Yeah.
What do you talk about? How do you resolve like a thing that's been like poking at you, right? Like that type of stuff. How do you initiate like that healthy being in relationships?
And that really is like the real shit, right? Like, I think that's what do they say? Like, the beginning of a relationship's the honeymoon period, you know, because you're going out to eat all the time. That's like when you get in that relationship way, and then you're like doing fun stuff or meeting people's friends, and you know, and everybody's on their best behavior. And then it's like 6 months in, you're on the couch, and it's like, can you stop chewing so loud? Like, seriously, you know, like that's real shit. But it's also like, you don't, you know, I don't want to say boredom, but some of that is a part, in my opinion, of like a relationship where I'm like, I'm not bored with you. I'm just so content sitting here in silence with you. You know?
Yeah. Well, the stage in there that I would be like thinking about is like, how are you co-creating the now? Right? Because then what happens is that for some people, there is this disillusionment of going from like the high energy discovery and like enamorment and like that infatuation of like, we're just like getting to know one another, right? And that stabilizes at some point. It just kind of gets just more stable. You're not having the spikes, right? Even like the fights at the beginning, they're like, so like you come back and you have like all those great euphemisms about like having sex after you fight. It's like, not when you've been married like so long, like you just want to go to sleep after you cry, you know? It's like all this, like being like for real. It's like, I just cry. Like, I don't want to have sex. I just want to go to sleep and like, you know, like I'll see you in the morning type of thing, right? But there is this like ideas that even when we're like in that honeymoon stage, we have like more like space for those spikes, the big like emotions, the happy ones, but also the low ones, because we're trying to figure it out. Like, are we gonna, you know, fight for one another? We have like all this like cultural sort of myths, right, like of what it's supposed to look like. But then there is a part of like, how are we co-creating our lives when like things are now stable, when there aren't this like big highs and the lows that may come. But now it's just life, and like, what are we gonna make together? Like, that's a question that I don't think people sit with when they're entering like more like the long-term stages of a relationship. How are we gonna do this? Like, what is it gonna look like if we have a choice, right? And I think that that's a part of the relationship education that I'm feeling really excited, because the more that I talk about this, the more that people are like, you're right. I never thought about like, where did I learn to be in relationship, right?
Yeah. It's so true. You really just kind of copy what you've grown up with, or that's why so many people end up in like toxic relationships, is that's all they've witnessed, or, you know, are attracted to chaos because that's all they've seen. That's all they know.
Or you're learning from like TV and movies, which is not great either.
Yeah,
That's
Love
like,
is Blind or The Bachelor. It doesn't exist.
well, the reality is the same. Like, I mean, this is like with porn, right? And people like learning what sex is supposed to be like. And it's like not typically what porn looks like. That's not, you know, someone's not typically getting like pleasured in that scenario if that's the case. But
You're
I think
so
it's
sweet about it. I would have worded it so different. I'd be like getting gangbanged.
that's not the reality. I mean,
on most days on a Tuesday night.
Yeah. I just got off at 6. I don't have time for that. 2 hours till bed.
I'm exhausted. I gotta stretch. I don't have time.
Yeah, exactly. I have to stretch.
I don't know about you, but Wednesday morning sex does not look or feel like porn.
No.
Pops in.
Yeah, seriously.
But that's the reality too, right? Like that if we're not learning those techniques and have those tools, and we're learning from wherever we can grasp it from and what we think is real, and then if we in our own like childhoods and how we grew up were like very surface level relationships, and that's all that we knew, that's what you're gonna like kind of have to deal with, right? Unpacking that, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. What do you feel like? So like, okay, so this is a new kind of, not new venture for you, but this is like a pivot, like you said. So what really do you like focus on? Like, what is like step one?
Step one, oh, that's a good one, because I've been thinking about this. Like, what is the first thing that I'm going to teach about? Because I'm hosting a bootcamp, a relationship bootcamp, by the way. I'm really excited about that, because it's like, I was going to offer one workshop and then wait a month. And I was like, no, like people going to have all of this all at once, think about it, chew it over, and then hopefully have like feel more empowered, right? To do things differently. And so this is what I've kind of decided that for me, it's like the most logical place to begin is our own self-awareness. Right? If you don't know what your triggers are, if you don't know what does it feel like to be overwhelmed and out of capacity, like literally not have room to deal with whatever's in front of you, if you're not aware of the things from your past that are showing up, from the wounds that other relationships have left you, if you kind of go in blindly and we say, well, like use I statements, right? What am I going to use I statements for? Like, I feel that you're making my life miserable, right? Like, that's not a feeling, right? I feel frustrated and I feel sad, and I feel sad because, or when you do this, right? But there's a different way that sometimes like this I statements can be like actually really weaponized. It's like, I feel that you're an asshole. Like, that's not necessarily like what would be helpful, right? So the first step, I think, really has to come to, and you said it earlier, Stacey, like we're never gonna be done with this like journey of knowing ourselves, but just those kind of like basic parts of like, when I'm cranky, I was like, have I slept enough? Have I drank water? Have I eaten? Right? Oh yeah, I haven't eaten. Like, probably not a good time to have a conversation with me, right? Probably not a good time to be asking me what I want to eat when I'm hungry, right? Like, it's just like not gonna get my best version. And so how do we know those things? Because then the next step is like, how do we then get to know our partners and their things? And then how do we communicate about them when we are coming in together to try to problem solve something, right? And so it requires almost like this two people have the curiosity to begin exploring, understanding, kind of taking in a peek on what's going on inside, and then how is this affecting us, right? If we jump directly into the relationship without a basic understanding of who we are, I think we're going to be missing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that.
When's your boot?
Oh, God.
Sorry, when is your boot camp?
The 23rd to the 26th.
Okay.
And so it's going to be a live 4 sessions, so Thursday through Sunday, but I'm going to have a replay for the people that can't come. And then I'm also doing like a VIP section where you can kind of come and ask more specific questions about the material. It's not therapy. It's not like where we're going to come and pour out the things that are going on, but more just like, hey, like I've been trying to communicate and I'm using I statements, and I'll probably ask like, tell me one of your I statements. How does it sound? And to be able to provide like that, I in therapy with my clients, to say alternative conversations. They always laugh because I'm like, alternative conversation, right? Like, it's like I come in.
What
like,
a great way to say it.
What if?
Yeah,
What
you have all these
if-
cool little sayings. I'm gonna keep all these.
It's because like I've done it for so long, you know.
Yeah.
And so like whenever like people are like, I'll say like, play out what happened, right? Like what was the incident, and then I'll pick up like these things. It's like, oh, this is where you got lost. This is where the you lost them, right? And I'll be like, alternate conversation. I'll say another couple, another planet, another timeline, like right somewhere else. They might have said it this way, and it's always this like, you're right, I could have said it a little bit different, right? And then we do then at that point we do like the like backtracking. But what was happening to you that now when you're not in the middle of the fight, in the middle of like being activated, you can access and think, yeah, I didn't handle that well, because that's the part of the education, right? Like the knowing of ourselves, that if we are not showing up as our best selves with our partners, many of us, what we do is that we freeze, we beat ourselves, we like shame ourselves, like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad partner, or like this like thoughts about ourselves that are kind of like a spiral of like, I'm not good enough, or like I shouldn't be in a
interfering thoughts.
relationship, this is not gonna work, right? And instead what we want to say is like, oops, I messed up, I'm so sorry, partner, I was not showing up at my best, can I tell you why, and can you give me a minute to gather myself? Or if it's not now, like this is another part I always say, like, I know I can't talk to you right now. It's not a no, never. It's just a not right now. And so then when is a better time, right? And so, but all of that really requires that you know your why you're needing to take a break, where you're needing to stop, where you're needing to like, you know, gather your thoughts and your feelings, because we get flooded. You know, it's like a flood. It's like the gates are open and it's destructive. And that is not going to be the best time to really resolve issues, period, right?
Yeah.
And so, but you have to know that. Otherwise, I mean, I'm sure that you all have had these moments. I've been in fights that lasted 3 days. Like I remember those early 25s. It's like, we are not sleeping for 3 days. We're going hard at this. You're at work and I'm texting you, right? Like it just never ends. Like those early relationships. I think about how I used to show up, and like some of those parts being so flooded and not knowing how to stop the gate, right? But it requires that you know yourself.
Yeah. I feel like this isn't like I'm not in a relationship, but I feel like I've been trying to be better, you know, with like, you know, I got a roster, right? So it's like I got multiple people on my team, right? And I mean, no one's on the team, they're just on the roster, but like one person specifically that I've been like talking to, I'm just not feeling it. And I was proud of myself because I communicated like, yo, I'm just not into this. It's not really like benefiting me. And like me a year ago probably wouldn't have done that because you know, I just didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. It probably would have just naturally faded off, when it's like, no, it's been long enough to not be like a dick about it. You know, so like I feel like in relationships, like leading into that, do you feel like in relationships, like it is healthy to say like, hey, I need some space?
Yeah.
Like when you're, you know, because I know some couples that do that. And I've heard people say, well, space just creates like a break, and then a break leads to a breakup. And I'm like, I feel like it's healthy to say you want space, because I don't want to just say some shit I don't mean, maybe in a heated moment or when I'm hangry, you know?
You want to show up as your best self. And I think that's what's hard too, right? Like at least in my own personal experiences, when I need time or my partner needs time, and it's like just like giving each other that respect and space when like, oh, I might be ready to like talk now, and I figured out how I feel, like done my part of it, but then respecting that my partner maybe needs a little bit more time to show up as their best selves as well. And so like we're so complicated. We're like freaking crazy ass house plants. Like we gotta like figure it all out.
All the things. Yeah, you know, I'm thinking about the window of tolerance. So there's this framework that we call it the window of tolerance, which means that there's this reasonable window that we all have, where on most days we can show up as our best selves, and if not, at least our average selves, which is not causing damage, but also not causing damage to others, not causing damage to ourselves, right? Kind of this window. Depending on the circumstances and the context of what's happening in your life, that window at times kind of like closes down. Like imagine like those old school windows that is like closing down. And so
literally picture that.
Yeah. And so it comes to a point where literally, even if you were trying to squeeze in, there will be a limit. That there's nothing can squeeze in because the window is so narrow. right? And so what happens is that we're both activated, we both trigger, we have our own agenda, we want to be talking, we want to like solve this thing, right? It comes from a well-intentioned place. I want to solve this as quickly as possible. We have those things about like never go to bed mad. No, go to bed mad. Don't make your problem worse. Like go to sleep, please. Like take a break, you know, sleep in separate rooms, sleep on the couch. Like it's okay to do those things. So two things that come to me, right? Like I said, the window of tolerance is like the self-awareness. You have to know my window is closing down. But the other part is that these things have to be negotiated, not when you are in an argument. Mm-hmm. So two people are fighting and then somebody says like, oh no, I need a break. You are crossing my boundaries, right? Like, I hear about that. It's like weaponized therapy language. That's what it, straight up it is, right? Like I know how to use this. I have access to this type of language, and now I'm gonna go to my partner and think I'm higher than that, and be like, I need a break because you just crossed my boundary. Whoa, like, but this partner never knew that this was actually an option. They didn't know that they also could call the boundary. They didn't know that they could ask for a break, right? And we're just like throwing it on them. And so what the partner is going to do more times than not is like, what do you mean? You're right. And then it just escalates. So in terms of taking breaks, or in terms of kind of negotiating, how do you exit out when things get heated? These things should be discussed when you're not upset. This is proactive. The part of the proactive education about how to be in a relationship is that these things need to be negotiated. They're not fun to negotiate. You don't want to sit when you're having a good day and say like, hey, remember that other day that we fought? We're having a great day today though, but like, remember the other day that we fought? Can I talk to you and give you some feedback about what worked and what didn't work for me? We have the mentality that if we bring something that we're upset about or that hurt us from the past into a moment that is a happy moment, that will somehow we ruin it. But it's like, this is like the main thing I want to challenge everybody in is those are the moments where you actually get to be your best thinker, your best problem solver. And when your unit is the most close, and therefore is an opportunity to build something together. Mm-hmm. Right? But we have kind of heard about this messaging of, if I bring up the bad stuff when we're good, I'm just gonna turn the good stuff into something bad. And sometimes our partners may believe that, and they may subscribe to this idea like, we were having such a good day and now you ruined it. No, right? Like, and so it's a part of like the knowing ourselves and knowing our partners, but also the negotiating ahead of time. How do I bring this up? When do I bring it up? What would be, I have some folks that I work with, and they use the analogy of a runway. How do I give you and myself the most runway to make sure that the takeoff is less bumpy? And I love that analogy because we all need runway to take off and to just like, all right, like, oh, you want to bring something up to me? I had a bad day at work. Like, I don't know that today I can listen to you, but what about tomorrow night? Can we make like some special time? Do you want to go grab dinner and we talk about it, right? Because then you're not ambushing people with your problem, right? Runway.
I love that, because honestly, I don't know a single person who probably doesn't feel that way. Like, this is such a good moment. Why do I want to ruin it with, but it is true. You do need to have healthy conversations to have healthy relationships of all kinds.
Yeah. And I feel like that's when both parties are probably most likely to show up like in a space to listen and the other party ready to be heard, so feels like the healthiest space to show up in.
So ambush them. Got it.
Yeah. So get on that plane and jam into the
emergency landing.
But all of this takes practice, right? Like, it is like, because it is not as obvious. That's the thing. I think like the biggest lie that we've told ourselves is that because being in relationships is so natural that it doesn't take any work or any effort.
Oh, girl, if I had $1 for every time I heard that. I have a former friend who used to say all the time, I don't know why it's so hard. It should be easier. And I'm like, girl, maybe never been in a healthy relationship then. It takes some work, a lot of communication, a lot of talking.
And I'm gonna say the work, there's also maybe this association for some people that the work is like, like a drag, awful. But actually, when two people, I think about IKEA furniture, right? my wife and I could not ever build anything together. It was one of those things, it's like forbidden zone, like, you know what, let's not even, because
You
it is
throw
like
money at it.
guaranteed. It's just like, nope, like we're not doing it, right? And then it's been a little while. It was during the pandemic. We ordered something and we actually did it. We didn't negotiate it, think about it, talk about it. And then after, we were like, did we just build something? And we didn't like get into it, because it's like, this just like, do this and do that. No, but do it this way, right? Like, it's like the naggy sort of dynamic, right? And we were like, whoa, like that's awesome. And it really reflected a lot of the work that we've been doing together, right? So this idea that the work is just like hard stuff, it is hard at the beginning for most people, because usually we don't enter this doing the work unless something has happened that is like kind of creating urgency. But this stuff that I'm excited to talk about is like, this is the preventative stuff. This is the stuff that I think that if we start practicing it when we're not in a relationship, when we are, you know, with our siblings, with our parents, and not in this room, because the romantic relationships have like an additional fire of boundaries. Like, they're different. They need to be like really understood and negotiated in a very intentional way, because the romantic relationship has all these other vulnerabilities that our family relationships, our coworker relationships, they don't have. Like there is like, for the people that are sexually active with their partners, right? Like there is literally a rawness and a nakedness of that vulnerability state of showing yourself in all the parts of yourself. Which with our family or our coworkers, we still maintain a lot of choice to not show those parts or to curate them, right? Like, how do they show up? But with our partners, especially if we're long-term with them, they likely are going to see all of the parts of us, right?
Yeah. It's really hard for Stacy right now not to make a butthole joke.
It really was. You said naked, and I was like, oh, I was fighting it so hard. Melissa knows me too well. Because honestly, once somebody sees your butthole, that is the ultimate vulnerability. Talk about emotional intimacy.
I mean, intimacy is not just the act of sex, right? And intercourse and making out. Like, that is not intimacy. That's a component of intimacy. But there's a lot of people also that have healthy relationships where maybe this season of their life is not very sexually active, and they can still feel happy and satisfied in their relationships, right? And there's just so many myths, so many, this is what should be, this is what, you know, should be X, Y, and Z. And the answer is always, what should it be for you, right? Not what it should be for everybody else.
Well, not even just myths. I mean, I think myths is a good word, but what about like overgeneralizations, right? Everybody, I mean, so much root of bullshit is just people overgeneralizing. Like, this is what I was taught by my family or my friend group, and this is how it is. Like with how relationships are come natural and it's easy. It's like, yeah, I guess in a perfect world, but that's not the world we live in, you know?
Yeah.
It is. It's not.
I mean, the work we do on ourselves is hard enough. So it's like, and that's more important before you're entering into relationships. So it just gets extra complicated when you have a whole, you know, 1, 2, how many multiple partners, like it just becomes extra complicated.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay. So what's the next part? Don't give away the whole workshop, but.
Yeah. The next part, communication, then conflict management, and then keeping the spark alive, right? So those are like kind of the 4 components of the workshop: getting to know yourself, understanding like the basis of communication, then how do you problem solve, conflict management, and compromise, like reaching compromise. That's a whole other thing. Birth order comes, and like the conflict management and like the compromising. Like, gosh, birth order is always so fun when you have like an eldest child of a family with a baby of a family, or like a middle child. Like, also, like, that's like another element that people don't think about. Where did we learn to like compromise? And for a lot of us that have siblings, it's with our siblings, and birth order matters. And when
I have never even thought about that. Melissa, have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I've actually done like activities at work where we're like separating each other by birth order, and then just like talking through certain things, and it's like, oh yeah, you're definitely like the oldest, or you're definitely, and then we talked through like each of our own experiences, because there might have been like some outliers in the like oldest sibling group where, you know, their age gap was so large that then they like showed up as an only child, and it's like it's so mind-blowing. I love it.
I have never ever even heard of this, and as one of 5 kids, that's mind-blowing.
With Oh, I almost want to guess which child
Do
you're
it,
in your
do
family
it,
because
do
I
it.
don't know.
Do it.
I want to go for baby of the family.
No, not at all.
No?
No. I'm the second oldest.
Second oldest.
And everybody always thinks I'm the oldest because there's 5 years between my brother and I. They're always like, "Are you the oldest sibling?" Because I'm like the organizer, the like get everybody together, do the trips. So people are like, "You the oldest?" I'm like, "No."
I
I'm
was
the second
picking up on
oldest."
the fun part.
I was
because
gonna
there
say-
is-
To be honest, we're all fun. Like all 5 of us. We really are.
All right, who am I? I'm one of 3.
You're one of 3. You definitely have oldest daughter vibes.
I'm in the middle.
In the
She does have older
middle.
daughter vibes though. She is the
A
older
lot of-
daughter.
I am the older daughter. Yeah.
Oh,
There you
see,
go.
also because then we also then the next layers, right? Like this is so many layers. This is because at a basic level, even our experiences as siblings, right? Like it depends on the family. It depends, like you were saying, Melissa.
Yeah.
Then we have like all the parts of the socialization of as a gender socialization, right? Like whether you were socialized as a female, as a male, whether you identify in it or not, whether that belongs to you or not, the way that the world socialized you and imposed those rules on you. And then the things like the order of birth order, right? Whether you were triangulated by your parents, so sometimes there could be a child in the family that becomes like a pseudo third parent, right? Sometimes most of the time as a generalization would be like the oldest child in the family, but also it can skip, right? Depending on certain things. And so were you the one that was like with the parental unit as the like finger wagging, I'm gonna tell mom and dad, like all of this stuff shows up then when we're like trying to have sex with new people, like all of this stuff is like there in the very back of our minds, like trying to negotiate, like how am I gonna be in a romantic relationship with you, you know?
Okay, so what are the normal like combos? Like what's a healthy combo? Like a oldest.
Oh, that's hard to say. It's really hard to say because
There's so much to that, huh?
I know.
That's a hard one. Maybe there is research. If I find the research, I'm gonna send it to you.
Please, because I'm so interested in this. I like,
anything.
especially having so many siblings. I never thought about this.
You're like taking a toll on like, okay, are you the what where do you fall in your family?
Yeah, my last
Sibling
relationship was the baby of the family, and it was so obvious. So obvious. So yeah,
See.
like that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay,
Yeah.
so you mentioned earlier about attachment styles.
Yes.
And I know that's been like a huge topic of conversation, like I've seen a lot of that on like Instagram and TikTok, and everybody's all about it. Like, where do you stand on that?
Well, I mean, I stand in the fact that it's a theory that is validated and accurate and true. I don't specialize. I don't work from the lens of attachment. So I may get, I think in 90% like I know it, but there are some people that are like very specialized with attachment. And so basically the way that I like to explain attachment when I'm talking about it with folks that I work with is secure attachment looks like, imagine a playground and imagine like a 3-year-old and a caregiver. Whether you imagine a mom, a grandma, so like a main caregiver, right? And so this 3-year-old is old enough to walk around and kind of get away from the adult, but not old enough to be like on their own, right? So that's why I'm picking like that age. So imagine that you're at this playground and you're watching them. And so then this 3-year-old starts getting away from like the caregiver and they turn back. And the caregiver is like, it's okay, go ahead, right? Like from far away. They go and they climb a little bit higher. They maybe do something new in the playground and they turn back. And the caregiver is like, good job. But the caregiver is not moving. It's not coming, right? Like in this particular like imagery, like they're not coming. They're just sitting in this bench from far away. The further this kiddo gets away, the harder things, the higher that they go, they keep looking back, and the caregiver from far away is providing support, is cheerleading, is encouraging them to go further. And if something was to happen, if the kid was to get hurt, if the kid yelled, hey, come help me, there would be zero doubt that the caregiver in that moment would get up and respond and say, are you good? And even if nothing was happening, right, that they will come and check and they'll be like, oh, you're good. Perfect. I'm going to go back and sit down. Like, that's how I describe secure attachment. Mm-hmm. This type of security that you can go far away, that you can be your own person, that you can try new things. and that you have that security, that no matter how much time, how much space there is between the two of you, you can always look back and you're going to feel that sense of like, you got me. You're going to not get me once in a while, but that you're consistently going to be responding to whatever is in front of us, and to make sure that I can trust you, and that I can maintain that connected relationship with you regardless of the distance. That's how I describe secure attachment.
They're the best analogies ever. That like just
Yeah.
explain everything so clearly.
That was such like a visual too. I was like watching the whole thing. as
Literally,
you
I'm
were
like
talking.
imagining a kid going on one of those like super tall slides.
I was
Because,
imagining a grandma. What were you imagining?
My grandma.
Oh,
My grandma.
So that
Yeah.
also tells us sometimes about like what are the type of things that we're looking for in people to feel like, you know, like those cheesy lines of like, I feel like I've known you forever. I feel like it's like those parts of the people that really make us feel good. Or like those like, oh, I feel like I've known you forever. I know enough and I want nothing to do with you, right? It's because this templates, right? They imprint in our minds, and then we kind of see the world to those templates. So the more secure attachments that we've had, the more likely that we're gonna go out into the romantic world feeling like, I can find this, I can do this. It actually is gonna be uncomfortable, abnormal, unusual, weird, harmful, right? To be like, what? You're not like a safe, secure person? Like, there's the people that will bolt out when there is any of those like red flags or toxicity that comes up, and it's just like, nah, like I'm not doing this, right? Some people have access to that, and the reason that they have access to that really quickly is because they have likely had very secure attachments from a variety of people, where they have also had the space to communicate and to be in touch with what they need from those people, right? Because it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
Is a responsiveness, right?
Have you seen
So,
folks? Oh, so I'm so sorry.
No.
Have you seen like folks be more successful professionally that have that type of attachment style?
I think it just makes life a lot easier when
Yeah.
you can feel secure.
Like spread your wings a little bit.
Because your anxiety is like in check, right? Because it's not like you're not anxious when you're climbing that playground or you're going to the big slide. You're going to be anxious about life. There is going to be like this like worry, concern, but it's the fact that you can always turn back and think, I got a person that I can call that knows that they're going to come consistently, and that they're going to show up, and that they're going to tend to my needs, whether they're small or big. Right? So it's just when, and the cool thing about attachment is that we can ongoingly make new attachments with people. And so even if we didn't have those caregiving templates, that through romantic relationships, we actually get the opportunity of relearning and revamping our way that we attach. It actually can be really healing to find a partner where you can have that imagery, that picture of like you being 3 years old, even though you're 40, even though you're 50, even though you're 28, right? That you
41.
can think yourself being a 3-year-old and thinking about your partner being that person that is going to come and check in on you, or that is going to be cheering you on. Like that stuff, there's not a limit of how many secure attachments you can have, or being able to build them at any age.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, that is. And it all really ties into like in saying that, like your 3-year-old self, that all really ties into your inner child wounds too. God, we can make this episode like 6 hours. I'm so intrigued by all this.
I mean,
there's so much content just like surrounding.
Yes.
I don't know why I follow this person, but there's somebody I follow that it's like she basically pitches workshops to be like a high value woman, which I think just caters, but a lot of it's catering to like, you're not meeting the right men because you're, you know, this is your attachment style and you're not like a high value woman. And something about it just like creeps me out, because I'm just like, well, why wouldn't you just want to be like a high value woman for yourself, and then you will attract the right partner, not like become a high value woman to convince somebody to know your worth. I don't know. It just, the way she words the stuff, I'm just like, I don't know about those workshops. Seems real backdoor. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think it is like the oversimplification of a lot of the social media kind of pitching of this stuff, that it requires that you oversimplify. That's been like a really big challenge for me to show up in social media as a therapist, as a relationship educator, that all of these things to me have so much nuance that is unjust to just put them out there. To say, for example, like if somebody, like I've seen posts that are like, if somebody doesn't respect your boundaries, then you gotta leave them, right? And it's like, oh oh, it depends. Like, because I would want to know, like, tell me about how you're going about establishing your boundaries, how this negotiation happened, right? I can go into the layers. All to say that it is perfectly okay, and that it is necessary when there is abusive situations, or when there is something that is creating unsafety for you. Of course, cut it off. In most cases, when there is not like this elements of high risk harm or abuse, right, we can miss out on an opportunity to actually understand and learn about our partner, but also about ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is another one that you're gonna like, Stacey. I talk a lot about listening and the art of listening. I consider myself a professional listener. I'm a professionally trained listener. I have to be attuned to the verbals, non-verbals, the energetic, the physical, right? Like my listening is like a holistic type of listening. And I've had to explain to the some of my clients, my patients, that sometimes I have a parallel dialogue, because sometimes like my own stuff gets triggered. Sometimes it's like I'm hungry. Sometimes like my own parallel voice. But being able to be a professional listener allows this voice to exist without interrupting my attention, right? On 99% of the time. Sometimes it can be disrupted, and I need to like take a deep breath and come back to ground myself, right? But in most cases, like this dialogue that's happening is just kind of like noise. So one of the things that I differentiate in terms of listening is, are you listening to respond? Are you listening to understand?
Yeah. They call that active listening, right? That's
active listening.
Yeah.
Right. And so am I trying, when my partner is talking to me, when we're trying to discuss something, am I trying to listen to respond? Because then it becomes kind of like that game of like the jump rope, where you're just like, when do I get in? Because I heard something, and I heard something that I don't agree with, or a discrepancy. You said 3, but it was only 2, right? And then you get hijacked. You are no longer present in the conversation. What did your partner what were they actually saying? Because you became so preoccupied about when you're gonna jump in, right? And so I do this exercise with folks where it's like we practice listening for an amount of time with a timer and everything. And listening is really hard, right? And so those are like the type of things that like I want to kind of share with the world, because it shouldn't be a secret that there's an art to listening, and that likely you're not a good listener, like for people, right? And so like those like little nuggets of how to do relationships just a little bit better, to give yourself a better chance. Like that's the type of stuff that I want to really be championing right now. I'm gonna call it
Get it.
That is so huge too. Like the whole time you're saying that, I was listening, but like I was literally thinking about my own, like an old version of myself that was that triggered person, right? Where it's like everything feedback people would give me would like make me be on the defense in my 20s, and I would like want to attack. And then, to be honest, my last teaching job, it was just like, they were like, how are you with feedback? I'm like, great. And then it was like, oh, I'm getting feedback all day, every single day. It's like feedback boot camp, where you're just like, you can't have an ego about, the feedback you're getting, because it really was to make you better. And it really was to like enrich the quality of life for the students I taught, and so it's like, that was really instrumental for me. And I think about my own family dynamics, and I guess that's where for me it gets tricky in all relationships, where it's like, how do you deal, like you're giving us all these tools, right? Even just being a guest on this podcast, like you're giving even Melissa and I know the both of us are just soaking all this up and just like, oh my God, we're both so reflective. We're going to definitely like be thinking about this all weekend.
I feel like we rob you every time that you're
every
on
time,
here.
right?
Like we're
Like,
getting free therapy.
We're like getting free therapy.
No, listen, this is what I tell people. If you were in therapy with me, oh no, you will know. You will know. This is not therapy with me. Like, you would know.
Dude,
I think conversations.
I want to go to therapy with you. I feel like you'd whoop my ass.
Conversations with you are just therapeutic. There,
yeah,
how's that?
There we go. Good play on words.
With a lot of love, Stacey would be done with a lot. Of love.
I know. I love that. But I honestly need that. But like, no, I think about my question was like, I feel like within my own family, there's always a lot of conflict, because there's so many of us, everybody's hands in everybody's pots, and sometimes it gets messy, but it's like, yeah. But I feel like I've tried to be better about like, let me listen, like with it, hear you with the intent to understand, but I don't feel like I get that back.
Yeah.
It's always like, you're doing this to be malicious, and my strong personality is very triggering for a lot of my family members. So it's like, I don't really, how do you like handle that when the other person is just attacking you and you're really like, I'm really just trying to hear you. And do you want me to not respond at all? Like, how do you want me to do that? You know?
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard because I think in order to really enact all these tools and all this knowing, all the self knowing that now it's ready to be practiced in relationship, we need a level of fertile ground. I like to call it fertile ground, that you know that you're going to be depositing like little seeds that at some point will pay off, even if it's not immediately. And I think the line becomes, when we're like kind of thinking about boundaries, how do you have a discernment? How do you know when this plot of land that you're trying to plant seeds into is not fertile, and then now it's just depleting you, right? And I think that that's like a very complicated question when it comes to family, right? Because as Latinx folks, like we come from collectivistic families where like like family is so ingrained in like the core of how we live our life. And it becomes really complicated because there is also a lot of infertile ground where like nothing will ever grow for the time being. It may change later, but it does require that you have a willing participant. Like that's one of the biggest parts, and not somebody that has it perfect, right? Because you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have done all the work. Like, you know, like people like I hear these things of like, I can't date until like I'm healed. No, like actually, if you date, like don't be toxic, right? Like there's a difference. Like if you know you're being toxic, like don't do it. But there is also like this part that is really beautiful about doing your work when you're having to see yourself through the eyes of somebody else, and somebody else who actually sees you as fertile ground too, right? And then they're providing you feedback about how you're showing up, and then to be able to do your work around that mirror, that gentle mirror that you're getting from somebody, right? So it's complicated because I do really think, and like for me, like as a therapist, right, and as a person that does this for a living, it's not easy. It's taxing. It's work that requires a lot of intentionality. I need to be really present. And so when people come to me, or even like with the joke, right, like, oh, it feels like being in therapy, it's like, no, like this is not it. Because if we were in therapy, like I would be present in a way with you that it's about our relationship has boundaries, and it has like my clients need me to show up in certain ways, and I honor that, right? And so but with that said, the people that I feel like I can pour this extra stuff, like to come on this podcast, to hit you up and be like, hey, like I have a couple of new things that I really want to talk about. Can I do it with you, with your community? Because this is fertile ground. This is not a waste. I don't feel for a second that whatever I'm sharing with either of you or with your community is wasted. This is the fertile ground where things grow, and this is the place where I want to pour my energy and my time. Right?
That's so sweet.
I love hearing that.
Yeah, no,
So
I really
fertile.
immediately thought, I was like, I have some new stuff to talk about. This is the place. This is where
I've been so pumped on like, if for, you know, we'll like shout out all your info at the end, but I've been so pumped on like all your content. Like you kill it, and everything you've been saying, I'm like, it's just really been resonating. So when you reached out, I was like, oh, this is beautiful. Like it's not that we wouldn't have any other guests on twice, but like, you know, it's
special.
I know. Exactly. We haven't really asked a lot of people to come back, you know, because it's like, yeah.
Well, okay, and our last episode was like 2 hours long, so because we just had so much to talk about.
I listen to it in parts for sure.
Part 1, part 2. What are some issues that couples, not even couples, I would say just sometimes it's families, typically come to see you with? I mean, there's probably a ton, but
so there's 3 kind of focuses that I have. So I have individuals, BIPOC and first gen folks, usually adult children of immigrant families. That's kind of like my niche. Like, so that BIPOC experience, that the issues that come around imposter syndrome, about sense of worth, around finding your voice, right? Like that kind of stemmed from family dynamics, or like those inner child wounds, right? Like wounds are from the past. Like that's group 1. Then I have group 2, which is BIPOC couples, and this is also like the this is what we're gonna talk about Benito and Kendall because I'm so mad at Benito right now.
So bad.
You know, but it's like the cultural differences that come up in couples and in relationships and people in relationships. I also work with polypods and people who are polyamorous, and so, but the majority of the time it's like the dyadic work, because in order to go into more like triadic or like family work, you need to have the more of that fertile ground, like the willing participants, right? And so majority of the times doing the dyad work with people who are monogamous, non-monogamous, but who are BIPOC, who have those intersections of culture, because, right, you're talking about just being in a relationship, right? It's hard work, it requires that you're present, and now you're talking about cultural differences. Like, I keep thinking about how the heck is Benito and Kendall having a conversation? How are they going to
They're not conversing. They're not conversing is what's happening.
I'm gonna kick back for a second and let the two of you handle it.
Yeah, they're not conversing. Literally, my homegirl sent me this the other day. We were like going back and forth. She's like, I can't even imagine what he is talking to her about.
I'm gonna take it.
You both started real passionate about this, so I'm gonna let you guys have a couple minutes.
I fully prepared her. Like, girl, we got some shit to get off our chest. So just sit there, like Google it. I don't know. But like, no, you know what's so funny too is I can actually say this because she won't listen to this today, but I'm surprising. My friend's birthday was on Tuesday, and I'm surprising her. Harlow's is doing a Bad Bunny birthday celebration tonight.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm Christina, and I'm surprising her. She has no idea. Her husband's just like going to come over here and then we're going to go. And I'm like, I don't know if I should boycott, but it's like, it's Harlow's. It's not like he's throwing it, you know? But I'm just like,
mad. Like, I have not listened to Bad Bunny like in 3 weeks. Like, I just cannot. I feel
like, how could you?
Devastated and disappointed and all of that. But from the relationship lens, right? I think about like the couples that I see is a lot of those couples that have some clear cultural differences, but also the very nuanced cultural differences, because we sometimes think that, for example, we might assume that white folks don't have culture, or that there is no like nuances in like the way that they identify in, right? Because you can think about sexual gender orientation, about relationship diversity, but also things like religion, things like class, things like childhood experiences, right? That kind of form these pockets of identity that are culture at the end, like their family culture, the culture of origin, right? And so then I work with a lot of those folks coming in and kind of figuring out how do we get intentional about building a relationship, because we are so different, even though we assumed that we were very alike, or like during the honeymoon stage we could find no flaws in one another, and now we're like, oh shoot, like there's actually a lot of things that are very different about us. And then the third group that I work with is adult families. I have been working with sibling sets, with adult children and their elderly parents. And that has been a journey, like an amazing, beautiful journey. So folks, if you ever wonder, can you go to therapy with your sister, with your brother, with all your siblings, or with your mom or with your parents, you know, you can. And
I have to have you on call.
Amazing work. Yeah, honestly. Like,
no, seriously, because like one of my siblings, I have talked about this, where it's like we had very different childhood experiences, and it's something that keeps coming up, like a resentment issue. And I'm like, he's open to it. And I've said, I think it would be helpful, because at the end of the day, there is both like a want to be close throughout our whole lives. Yeah. You know, so it's like, so in that, I'm glad you're saying that.
Yeah, and that, like, you probably too could benefit from some skills and some tools, but likely, right, for you, and this is like the case where, you know, we say like everybody should go to therapy, everybody can benefit from therapy. I stand by that, but you don't need to, right? It's like a choice. But the tools and the skills can have a limit when there are layers and layers of like this nuance or trauma or just family histories, experiences, right, that would benefit from a facilitator. And so a lot of the times that's kind of like the role that I think I take. It is kind of in that professional listener role. This is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm hearing. And this is the disconnect. And I can, because this is what you're paying me for, to go up and just like, hold on. Let me take a second. This is what I'm hearing. And this is what I'm hearing. How is that different? Because walk me through it. Because like, I think you're saying the same thing. Or this is the place where the miscommunication is happening. And so for some people, right, like this would be like how do you know if you should be going to therapy with somebody that you love, whether it's your partner? It's like when there are these layers that are more personal, individual, where the skills by themselves need to be understood a little bit more with the nuance of your own kind of life for them to work. Because otherwise people could get disappointed or think like, but I'm doing all the skills and it's not working. And I don't want you to get disappointed of the tools not working, but rather there may be just things that need to be weeded out so that the tools can actually have a room to breathe, right? But when there are all these like differences, generational differences, for like when I've worked with like I worked with like a set that was a parent in their 60s and an adult child in their 30s, and the generational differences of like values, right, of like the assumptions that they're making of each other, because you live under the same home and you had all these experiences. And so to be able to really weed out, how has our life been different, like how is our experience different, and how can they both exist, right? Because it's not about I need to just validate my experience, like in this relational work, it's like validate my experience as I validate yours, because they both exist, and then we need to bridge, how do we meet, you know, in each other's world if our lives are so different. So that's how you would know to go to therapy. You know, and I think adult families should go to therapy. Like I it's my new favorite thing to do. I love, like, it takes a lot of courage because it's like ripping open very old stuff, but oh my gosh, I've seen some magical things happen. Magical things happen.
You've probably learned so much just from that piece too, I'd imagine, like just seeing all of that. And I think like for my own like dynamic with my family, I feel like it might have been us talking on the last podcast, but that like you could all be living and growing up in the same house, but you're having such different experiences because your parents were parents of a one child, you know, they were for a while. And so there's just like so many different dynamics to it that you didn't really grow up in the same household because you were then parented by parents of two children, or their ages were different than when they were parenting your older sibling or your younger sibling. So it's like you didn't really grow up in the same household, even though it feels like you did. And so I think just being able to like sit and like have someone kind of facilitate or mediate a little bit that those conversations of, you know, the frustrations we have with our own siblings of why you do things like the way you do. It's like there's so many things that play into it, like you said earlier, you know, gender, the sibling, like where you fall in the birth order. And so it's like having a little bit more compassion and understanding for where everybody was at. I think I would benefit from that.
That's so true too, because I think that like, well, beyond what you said, where it's like one, you know, parent of one kid and then a parent of, you have to even think about the dynamic of like a single parent who had to work so much that one of the siblings was helping parent the kids and like that, you know, or, you know, like in my case, two older siblings, three significantly younger siblings. It's like the mom that we had was very different from the mom they had, you know, it's like, so it's there's all those factors that come into play.
Oh, she was tired, man. She was tired by the time she got to them younger siblings.
I can only imagine.
It is so beautiful to be able to do. I think that this is what's also coming up for me as we're having this conversation, is that I have valued and continue to value individual therapy. But I remember seeing this Instagram quote, and I say it to my clients all the time, right? Like, we're in therapy a lot of the times for the people that won't go to therapy.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Like that is like such a like an Instagram thing that like still is like, yeah, I go to therapy to deal with the people in my life that don't go to therapy. Right. Yeah. And so one of the things also that people may not know is that you can invite people to your own individual therapy. Right. Like I've had people that maybe they don't feel ready to have a conversation, a hard conversation. And so we'll discuss like what would it feel like to bring that person, to let them know that, you know, that it's a kind of facilitator, that you want to share some things with them, and to have my support as you have these conversations. Right. And so you can do that. Like you can use your therapy time, your individual therapy time, to do the relational work. I really think that many times we get hurt in relationships, and so the way that we heal fully, right, in part it is through our own work, but if we have the opportunity to heal through relationships, it can be really, really beautiful and really powerful.
Love it. You're so amazing. I know I could listen.
I want to be in a relationship now, girl.
I want everybody to be in relationships. They're so awesome.
I love love.
I love love.
You're in all kinds of relationships.
Huh?
Yes.
We're all
Yeah.
in all kinds of relationships every single day.
I mean, like that's another thing. Like that's like not, and you're putting yourself in all kinds of relationships. You're dealing with this times all those times.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. People, I think, like the word relationship, I think everybody just always assumes it's your romantic relationship, where it's like, no, you have like
Yeah.
so many other relationships you deal with on a daily basis, right? Even we were talking about this like right before you got on, like even her moving to SAC, like we're just busy people. Maintaining our friendship, is challenging. We can't
Yeah.
always just maintain a friendship like that,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And even when we're not in a relationship with people, we're still like, the way that I kind of like to call it now is active relationships versus inactive relationships, because there are some of those things like family relationships that they just don't disappear because you're not talking to one another. It's just that they're kind of like on and off, right? But you stay in relationships and they impact you. Just because somebody's out of your life doesn't mean that it doesn't have some sort of still connection to you, right? And so active relationships and active relationships, and yeah, like there's just so many layers between it. I could talk about this forever, clearly.
And you know
So
where you can
love
find
it.
all this info is your workshop.
yes, I will. I'm
Probably
so
your
excited
website.
that's true.
about my relationship bootcamp, and I'm really excited, like in a way, to call it like a bootcamp, because it's like I want to like convey that this is like,
Oh yeah, I
step
gotta
in
stop
step.
saying workshop.
Like,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. No, it is a workshop, but I've been really intentional to call it a boot camp, because I want to kind of get like that, like pep in the step. Like this is important, y'all. Like, I think the other day I recorded a video for advertising, and I was like, it's like most of us are out there like the Hunger Games. May the odds be ever in your favor. And I was like, that's such a clever. I didn't write it. It just came like in the moment, right? And I was like, but it is like we're just out there like, love and light. Hope it goes well.
Yeah.
But like,
You should
how
have
are
like
you
a
gonna make
like,
sure
you
that
should have like a
happens?
Katniss Everdeen photo shoot. It just like have that on your flyer. That would be so sick. Yeah. Yeah. We're out here trying to
March
fucking survive.
27th.
Yeah, we're out here trying to survive.
The Hunger Games.
23rd, March 23rd.
Yeah, but it's like I really want to encourage people to like get like a little bit of a pep in the step of like how like being in good relationships feels good.
Mhm.
It just feels so good to have people that you can go in your playground as high as you can, and then you turn back and they're like right there, and you can count on them and feel connected and close to them and trust them. Like it's the best feeling.
Yeah.
Like, really,
I mean, beyond wanting, like now you're making me like kind of want to be in a relationship. I'm also feeling like so much gratitude, because like my support system, that is how I
Yeah.
feel, and in places where like my family has lacked, or, had been dealing with their own traumas and whatever, like our support system is amazing. Like, so I feel really grateful for that too. I
Yeah.
see all my friends at the bottom of the slide. I'm just waving like, bye guys.
And that's
I'm
the
like,
Here up
best.
for a month by myself. Hopefully I live through it.
I'm flashing you my boobies from the bottom of the slide.
is. Show me your tits, and then I know everything's okay.
She'll
Yeah,
be there.
but that's the best thing about attachment, that it can be healed, and we can make new connections about how we attach to people. And a lot of this comes from like our adult relationships, where we have now choice, and if we know the how to do it, come to my workshop.
No, boot camp. Boot camp.
I'm going to my boot camp. Go to the boot camp. This is important.
This is a boot camp.
I want you to look like G.I. Jane at this boot camp too.
Yeah. You come in like, okay, when is this boot camp? Like, when is all this launching?
Well, so it's already live. You can find it like on my Instagram.
Girl, you
It's
do not play.
March 23rd to the 26th. No, and then like for the people that miss it, I'm gonna have the recordings available to like kind of like do them on their own. It's just like if you do the live sessions, then you can ask questions and I can clarify some of the things that I'm talking about. But you can watch them. Like I'm really, really excited. Like I've put in a lot of work, and kind of I wanted to feel that it builds onto one another. Sorry, like the self-awareness, the communication, the conflict management, and then like keeping the spark alive. That's like another topic that we probably could talk forever. Like keeping that love alive, keeping the sexy going, the passion, like the intimacy, like that little spark, like long term. That's intention too.
Yeah, it's 100% intention. Yeah, like you really got to be wanting to work it out sometimes, no matter how horny you are. Like Melissa, like shit dies.
My shit has not died.
Okay, you're
I
brand
was like-
new. You guys haven't been together that long. I'd be worried if it did.
Hey, over a year. That's a long time. Anyway, what's your favorite word or saying that Adriana had this episode?
Oh, dude, window of tolerance.
Window of tolerance. Mine was gentle lens.
Hmm.
It just makes me self-reflect on like, okay, there's like, that's just such a beautiful statement, right? Like gentle lens.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Oh,
I love the
See?
window of tolerance because for me, it's like, that's to me, a gentle way of saying like my window of tolerance is closing for this,
Yeah.
right? Like,
shut down.
yeah,
It's
that shit is
closed.
closed now. That bitch is locked. So I need you to
Oh, you put
figure
a
it out.
stick in there. You put
Yeah,
a stick in there.
It is. You're not getting this open, sir.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So,
but look up the window of tolerance because it's really cool because then it has the highs, like a volcano, the lows, like kind of like blue days. Like it's a whole thing. So I'll probably do another boot camp on that.
yeah.
There's so many things. Like I just know so many things, and I'm just like, man, like I'm only the people that I get to do like one-on-ones. Like I get to share the stuff, and I think I really feel this like fire ignited that everybody should have access to this. Like, oh my gosh, like relationships can be easier.
Yeah.
I don't think we.
And
know
I love that you
I
want to
don't think
spread
we
that
know.
knowledge. Like that's so beautiful, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like that's
Exactly.
why you perfectly align with the intention of this podcast, like spreading the knowledge, you know?
Yeah.
You
And
come
so if
from this-
Benito and Kendall like have conflict and they're here in the podcast, like hit me up. I got you. I'll do an NDA. Like
She's not welcome on here.
I'll bridge the cross-cultural differences.
The tequila,
Let me
I
make
can
my
I
money.
can name 60,000 reasons why, but the tequila alone is a crime. Sorry, girl.
Ay.
He better not be drinking that tequila. I'll be real pissed.
I
If I
made
see him-
Stacey roll up, Melissa. Sorry.
If I see any ads with him drinking 818, I'm gonna lose my mind.
oh my gosh, I can't.
Okay, is it confirmed they're together or what?
There was pictures of them kissing, Melissa.
Well, you've probably kissed lots of people you weren't boyfriend and girlfriend together with.
Just this past weekend. For real.
I
That's
mean,
what I'm
that's a
saying.
good point.
They might
That's
have
a
just
good
been
point.
tipsy off of whatever tequila you're upset about. And then they started making
no, it's
out.
the second time. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
want
it's
to
a pattern. It's a pattern.
Yeah,
They're
it's
spotted
two
after the Grammys.
times.
They're spotted after the Grammys. I'm gonna call this episode Benito who? No, Benito
We don't know
Bootcamp.
him. We don't know him. We don't know him. Oh my
No, he doesn't get that
gosh.
much light. He doesn't get that much shine.
You're right.
No.
So we just, as we like wrap up, what are like share your, if you can just reshare like your Instagram, your website, and anything else that you are
Yeah.
currently working on that we can highlight.
So mainly where I'm active doing all this kind of similar work to what we've been talking is on my Instagram. So Adriana Rodriguez Wellness. So Adriana Rodriguez Wellness. You can spell it out. Adriana with one N. Adriana one N. That's my Instagram handle. And then for therapy is Adriana Rodriguez Therapy. So Adriana Rodriguez Therapy altogether.com.
I love the code switch.
Yeah, it's like, you kind of like make it easy on the ears. It's
yeah,
like
totally.
going back and forth. Yeah, and so on Instagram right now is what I'm doing a lot of the nuggets of info, just putting things like one of my posts that is coming out tomorrow is 8 conversation starters to talk about sex. And so you want to have conversation about sex? Like, here's conversation starter. Like I'm so excited. Like this stuff is
I
really
love
fun.
those.
I love it. And I love the passion you have behind all of it.
Yeah, me too.
It's just really fun, and I really believe, and I've seen, oh my gosh, like last night I teared up because just like to see people grow, it's just like what an honor. I learned so much all the time from hearing them, from them hearing myself talking to them. Like it's this like exchange ongoingly. It's just such a great thing. Like I love it. I love being a therapist and showing up for people.
You're
That's amazing.
facilitating healing. It's amazing.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You're putting
Yeah.
good into the world and it's coming back to you.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely feels like it.
I love
I have the two of you to show for it, so
Aw.
of course.
Well,
We
thank
didn't do
you.
anything.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just like appreciate these conversations so much, and I know that we all live busy lives, but we do need to hang out outside of the just seeing each
Yeah.
other on the
I
podcast days.
know.
Seriously.
We
Yeah, and you know
need to
Melissa's gonna go facilitate a healthy conversation after this.
Get
Good.
ready.
Make sure that
gonna
there's
text Casey.
enough. Make sure
Watch
there's
out.
enough runway
Okay.
to take off.
No crash landings tonight.
No crash landing on the
crash-
runway.
I'll wait till
No nose
tomorrow.
diving.
The 8 ways to initiate conversations about sex.
There
I'll
we
wait
go.
till tomorrow.
There we go. Perfect.
There you go.
Well,
All right,
thank
tell-
you for
thank you so
having me.
much.
Yeah,
thank you.
send Carla our love too.
Yeah.
Yes. Like she's waiting for me. We're gonna go grab a
Beautiful
beer now.
mess. Yes, life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess.